Hi there. If you're watching this video, you're either interested in using Emacs or you use it already. In either case, the Emacs pitch that piqued your interest probably included some tall claims and memes, but let's stick to the claims for now. Unfortunately, if you're new to Emacs or if you've not customized it beyond copying snippets of code from elsewhere, there's a big gap between knowing that Emacs is an introspectable, self-documenting, and live extensible environment and actually doing the introspection and the extending. We're going to do some live tweaking today and in the process put these claims to test. Typically, the internet and the manual instructs you to learn common help commands, describe function, apropos, customize, and so on. These can take you a long way, and I depend on these extensively, but they're not enough. They weren't enough today. So we're going to take a different approach to fix today's problem, which is the following. I found a question online seeking to change how Notmuch, the email client for Emacs that you're looking at, displays emails. This email in question has two MIME parts. There's the text and there's a patch. By default, these are not folded. I've folded them up here. Notmuch displays all the text MIME parts unfolded. So it looks more like this. Okay. The second email in this chain is similar. If you're following this mailing list to keep an eye out for something interesting, the patch here is a giant wall of text that you'd like to avoid seeing all the time. So the question was this. How do you ask Notmuch to fold up the diffs and the patches by default while keeping the text portion of your email open? So something like this. Okay. This problem might seem niche or esoteric to you, especially if you don't use Emacs for your email or if you don't follow mailing lists. I'd like to assure you that the general approach we're going to use to solve this problem works 100% of the time, no matter what your specific problem actually is. On the occasions that it doesn't work, we've truly reached the limits of Emacs live extensibility. So think of this as a recipe of sorts to get you started. A quick note, my key presses and corresponding commands are displayed up here in the top right. Now, I use the Notmuch email client, but I have no idea how it works. It's surprising though, how much you can do with no idea what you're doing. That's about as much preamble as I've got. So let's get started. Let's try the conventional approach first. So since this is a problem with Notmuch, let's customize group, Notmuch, and it looks like we have a whole bunch of options. Now going through this list, it appears that this is a problem with showing messages and threads. So chances are we'll find what we're looking for in Notmuch show. All right. Now there wouldn't be much point to this video if the behavior we wanted was available as a ready-made option in this list. So you'll have to take my word for it that it's not. Okay. So coming back here. So since the conventional approach failed, it's time to get our hands dirty. Now, I don't know how Notmuch works, but I do know how to work Notmuch. And I know, for example, that pressing the N and P keys shows me the next and the previous message in this thread. And in the process shows the email, including the parts that we want to hide by default. So the first function I'm going to call is find function on key. And I'm going to give it the key n. That takes me to the definition of the function that the key n invokes at that point. So let's maximize that. It looks like this is a stub that calls a different function that probably does the heavy lifting. So the next function I'm going to call, the next command I'm going to call is basically go to definition again, but on this function. And in Emacs, that's called xref find definitions. All right, that takes me here. We're clearly not at the end of this chain of functions that's displaying the email in question. And it looks like Notmuch tree show message this one must be doing the work. So let's continue. We go to its definition. All right, this is a bigger function and I don't care to know what all this code does. I just want to find again the function that's doing the heavy lifting. Scanning this function, it's a little hidden, but I'm going to guess that the function notmuch here, right? It takes some kind of ID of the email in question and it shows it. And also it looks like the buffer is being set to this, right? Some buffer is being set to this. So on a hunch, I'm going to assume it's notmuch show. I'm going to jump there and run notmuch show with the given thread ID and display results. All right, looks like this is it, or very close to what we want anyway. So scrolling through this, I'm trying to find the point at which the decision is made to show the patch and the text unfolded. All right, going through this, I see something called inline override types, and that looks promising. So we're going to invoke a new function here. It's one of our help functions from before. Specifically, I'm going to invoke describe variable, right? And it picks this by default, the variable that the cursor is on. So let's do that. And cool, it says the types to be treated as attachments even if they can be displayed inline. Bingo, looks like we hit the jackpot. Okay, so we know that we need to do something with inline override types, but instead of going ahead and doing that, I'm going to put a pin in this. I'm going to place a marker there. Okay, so we can jump back there if we need to. And I want to see what else is going on in this function. There's some crypto stuff. We don't care about that. All right. All right. This name looks promising. Notmuch show build buffer. If I had to guess, I would say that this function is the one that's actually gathering up all the text, formatting it and displaying it, and possibly also dealing with the folds. So let's jump to its definition. And it says display messages matching the current buffer context. That sounds about right. Okay. All right. Again, most of this code I'm just going to be blind to. I just care about the part that does the folding. So scanning through this function, it looks like notmuch show insert forest. I wonder why it's called a forest. It looks like this might be promising. Okay. The other stuff down here, it runs some hooks, it applies some state, and then these are some options. So I'm going to ignore all of that, pick the most promising function and jump there. Okay. Oh, insert the forest of threads. Okay. I guess if one thread, email thread is a tree, then a bunch of them is a forest. So it kind of makes sense. Okay. So clearly the function here doing the work is notmuch show insert thread. So we jump to its definition. Ooh. So we've got notmuch show insert tree here. Okay, let's jump to its definition. And finally, it looks like this deals with individual messages or with trees. And there's probably some kind of recursion going on here to walk through a tree structure. But what we care about is a single message, email message being inserted into the buffer. So we jump again. Okay, insert the message at depth in the current thread. All right. Let's see, we don't care about headers because our problem is not with headers. At least I don't think so. So let's keep going and look for something that's doing the work of inserting the different parts of the message. And we don't care about indentation. All right. Okay, if I had to guess, I would say Notmuch show insert body is the function that's responsible for this behavior, since our problem lies in the body of the email message. So let's jump to its definition. Okay. And something to do with registering IDs, I don't care. Notmuch show insert body part. All right, I think we are now finally approaching the end of this chain of jumps. So for each part, right, in the body, it inserts that body part. So let's see what it's doing, what this function is doing. Insert the body part at depth. Hide determines whether to show or hide the part. Yay. All right. I think we have finally reached the function that's responsible for this behavior. If hide is t, hide the part initially and show the button. Cool. This is what we want. Okay. So let's see what we're doing with hide. Okay. So it looks like we're setting a variable here inside this let block that's the opposite, or that's not whatever hide is. So if hide is t, show part is nil, and that's kind of what we want. Okay, now instead of trying to understand how this function works, I'm just going to try and work at this level of abstraction, right? And figure out why or how to set the patches to hide by default. So basically we want to ensure that this function is receiving a value of t for hide when the body part being inserted is of MIME type text/diff or text/patch. Okay, now if you remember, we saw an option earlier called something, and that looked promising. So I want to try that first because that might be much simpler than this. So I'm going to put a pin in here as well, and then jump back to that point. All right, so it was here. And if you remember what this variable was, these are types to be treated as attachments, even if they can be displayed inline. Okay, that's cool. So let me open up a REPL. Okay, and we're going to set inline override types. Well, first let's figure out what it actually is. So it turns out it's nil right now. Okay, so we need to set it to something. The question is what? Let's see if we can customize this variable. Let's insert. Okay, from the customization type, it looks like this is going to be a list of regular expressions. Okay, so it's going to be a list, okay, of regular expressions, but I don't know what to put in there. So let's see if we can figure out what's being added to it here. Oh, it looks from this code like the thing being added to it is a MIME type, basically. Okay. For example, the MIME type of application star. That's what the code there seems to be doing. Of course, I'm guessing that this means that MIME types of type application, like PDFs, right, are not shown inline, which makes sense because you wouldn't want to show a PDF inline. At least that's my take on what this function is doing. So the thing we wanted to hide, if I remember correctly, was of MIME type text/xdiff. Okay, it was either that or xpatch. I'm going to try xdiff first. So let's set that. All right, and with that done, let's jump back to our email message. So I had that saved here. We're back here and aha. All right. So now we see that by default, this is not being set. I mean, it's not being unfolded. It's folded. And if I try to unfold it, oh, okay. All right. This kind of makes sense. What's happened now is that the inline type whatever variable has turned it from an inline MIME part to a not inline MIME part, which means that to view this diff, we would have to actually save it to a file. But that's not what we wanted, right? What we wanted to do was to show the diff inline, but just start with it folded, so that if you're interested, you can just press a button, right? Which of course doesn't work now, right? So you can press a button and then unfold it in place. So it looks like this solution isn't quite what we want, although it's workable. Okay, so going back to the REPL, I'm going to set this to nil again. Okay, and if we go back here, oh yeah, so now you can see that the previous behavior is back, right? And you can fold and unfold it, but it starts off unfolded. And ditto here, I can fold it and unfold it, but it starts off folded. It would be cool if it had just worked, but it looks like we have no option now but to get our hands dirty and get into the nitty-gritties of Notmuch. Still, let's see what we can do. Jumping back to the function that implemented the hide behavior, right, where we had placed a marker before. Okay, so the question is, how do I get the hide argument being passed to this to be true when the MIME type is of type text/xdiff or whatever? And there's a few different ways to do this. Let's actually go back here. So customize is your friend until it's not. Of course, the best case scenario is if you have a customize option, right? Then you're done, but we don't. Okay, the second thing I'd look for is some kind of hook. A hook is a location for you to insert some custom code in the working of a function as provided by a package author. And the third option is, well, that's the nuclear option. It's def advice. Okay, and that's where you reach into the guts of a function and change how it behaves. It's the most powerful and the most universal, but you know, if you can use customize or a hook, then you should probably avoid using advice. Going back here, which of these options is available to us? That's the question. Okay, let me search for hook. There is a hook being run called Notmuch show hook. Okay. Oh, we went off somewhere else. Okay, this is an opportunity to show that you can also jump back to where you jumped from with, what is this command? xref go back, right? So I'm going to call xref go back. That takes me to the last place I jumped from, and now I'm going to jump again. That brings us back to this function. And just for good measure, I'm going to narrow the buffer to this function so we don't end up somewhere else, right? So the buffer only shows this function for now. Okay, we could use a hook. It was Notmuch show hook, right? These are functions called after populating a Notmuch show buffer. So one option that's available to us is to write a function and add it to this hook that after a buffer is shown, goes in there and then folds all the email parts of MIME type text/xdiff and so on. But that's a lot of work, right? And I'm thinking of doing it in a much more direct way, using the nuclear option, writing some advice. What we're going to do, I think, is to set it so that, to change the behavior of this function so that if the body part type being shown is of the type we want folded by default, then the hide option is set to true. Okay, and I can never remember how to write def advice or function advice, so I'm going to do what I always do, which is open up the eLisp manual, okay, and then search for advice combinators. There we go. And we want to change the argument that's passed to the function, and I know that there is something, there we go, filter args, right? It calls the function first, that is the function we write, and then uses the result as the new arguments to pass to the old function. That sounds workable, at least. So let's go back here, open up a scratch buffer, put that in there, and get started writing the advice. Looking at how this works, it looks like the function, our function, which is function here, and the original function is old fun. Our function is supplied the arguments as a list. So let's call it Notmuch hide or Notmuch show, because that's the prefix, right, of all functions in this file. Notmuch show hide patches, okay, and let's add a my here for good measure to indicate that it's a function written by us and it's not part of Notmuch. And this is going to accept a list of the original arguments, right? And the original arguments are what we see up there: message, part, depth, and hide. So let's copy that. Okay, these are the original arguments, and what we want to do is read args into these. So we can use a destructuring bind for that. And since this argument is optional, we can hide that behind a cons. Okay, so destructuring bind of that to args. What we've just done is destructure args into these four things where hide could be nil. Okay, and now we can work with that. And we know that we want to pass the first three arguments as is. So message, part, and depth are passed as is. Now it's the fourth one, the hide argument, that we care about. What do we do here? What we are looking for is a way to test the MIME type of the body of the email. The question is, how do you do that? And I think I see the solution right up here, right? Because we want to find the MIME type of the part, and it looks like this call does it. And then we want to match the MIME type against something, and it looks like there's a match right here. We can check what it does. It returns true if its two arguments are matching content types. That's pretty much exactly what we need. So what we can do is use an if let, and then copy the MIME type down here. Okay, and next we need to check if this MIME type is of the type text /xdiff or text /xpatch. So we can use a filter for that. If it matches, let's call it type. If the type of the MIME type matches text /xdiff or text /xpatch, okay, then we do something. We set hide to true or something like that. Okay, so the test for this we can obtain from above. All right, so if MIME type matches type, right, that's the function, we map it over this, and if it's true for either of these, then we're done. Okay, then essentially what we have is Now we need to set height to true. So then we pass height as true. And if it's not, then that's the else clause of this if statement. Then we just pass whatever height is from before. And there's a car in here. Because of the way I destructured this, height is going to be a list, and we want its first element. And I just want to confirm that the car of nil is nil. Okay, so we're not going to run into an error if height is nil. So I think that's about done. Okay. Oh, there's one other thing I would like to do here, and that's define my Notmuch hide mime types, or let's call it fold mime types. Okay. Okay, and I'm going to set this to whatever's down there, down here, right? So let's see. We want to exchange what's here and down there. So let's, that should do it. Unfortunately, the quote was left here. Okay, cool. So now it's a variable that we can customize. Well, not yet. I have to turn it into a def custom for that. I'll just leave it as a global variable. And now we can add to this other mime types that we want to start folded. So this is cool, and this is cool. Oops, something went wrong. Let's see. Okay, so this has to be bound to something because this is an if-let clause. There we go. The last thing we want to do is, of course, add the advice itself. So it's advice add. We're adding the advice to that function up there. And then it's filter args, and the function we're adding is this function down here. Okay, so there's that, there's that, there's that. If we did this right, everything should just work. So let's cross our fingers and jump back to the email. Okay. Aha. All right. It seems to have worked. And I want to ensure that the inline, whatever it was called, override types, that's still nil. So it's not the old idea that's working here. It's the advice that we just added. Let's go to the next email. It's still folded. Okay. This is what we wanted. Cool. The other thing we want to test is if we can unfold it inline. So let me test that. Press D, unfold. Fold, open fresh, fold, sorry, unfold, fold. Yep, it starts off folded. So we're done. In summary, here's what we did. We followed the documentation, right? For example, we used, what was it? Describe variable, right? We introspected, of course, right? We used xref find definitions and, of course, find function on key. We live extended, of course, with advice, and we used a bunch of other tools to make our job easier. But there should probably be a Notmuch customization option. In any case, I think I need to get that code in the scratch buffer before I lose it. There we go. And then we don't need that anymore. We don't need that. Okay. And now I just need to put this in my init file and we are done. All right. Whether it lived up to the claims, the tall claims that we made at the beginning, that's for you to decide. But I hope you enjoyed watching this. Have a good day.